Good morning, Morai Rabotai Bruchim Abayim. We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Lamed, Hey Amud Bet, 20 lines up from the bottom of the Amud by 2 dots. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, for Michael Ben Nahid, for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, and especially dedicated to the Refuah Shelema of Miriam Bat Nosrat to Abraham, that should all have Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Amen. His Amud is also being learned as a zchut for the neshama of Shlomo ben Yaakov and Rachel Yafa Bat Netanel. This week's learning of the community has been dedicated by the Shea family, Dayan family, and Cohen family. It should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot. Amen. Okay, so we got down to the discussion of Maaser Sheni, whether or not the etrog of Maaser Sheni is kasher. If you find yourself in Yerushalayim and it's your Maaser Sheni, so you could technically eat it, would that be kasher or would that not be kasher as your etrog of Arba Minim? Now, we learned that Truma, the Truma you cannot use, etrog of Truma you cannot use for your Arba Minim. And the reason is pretty simple, because the Gemara said two different opinions, whether it's because the lulav is always wet and you put it next to the truma etrog, and the wetting of the etrog makes it susceptible to tum'ah when it's truma. A fruit of truma, so long as has not come in contact with water, it's not susceptible to tum'ah. Once it becomes wet, then it becomes susceptible to tum'ah, and you're not supposed to make truma susceptible to tum'ah. So therefore, maybe that's the reason, or maybe the reason is because you keep on holding it together with the lulav and hadas and arava, and it gets scratched off, and the outer peel of the truma, the etrog, now it's not going to be appealing. No one is going to want to eat it, and that's damaging the teruma. So we know that the etrog of teruma you cannot use, and the etrog of orla we already also mentioned you cannot use, because either it is asur be'achila, you can't eat it, and somehow when you can't have the ownership to eat it, it's considered a lack of ownership. Even though that monetary is mine, but I can't eat it, that's a lack of ownership. Or because etrog of orla is asur b'hana'ah, and once it's asur b'hana'ah, its market value is 0, and something that is market value is 0, even though that I quote unquote own it, it's not considered that it has din mamon, and therefore once it doesn't have din mamon, it's not considered mine. It's a lack of lachem. So now we're going to compare this etrog of Maaser Sheni to those two items to see what the halacha of etrog of Maaser Sheni is going to be. V'shel Maaser Sheni b'Yerushalayim, let's take a look. Lemanda amar mipenesh machshira, according to the one that says that etrog of teruma you cannot eat because you got to make it susceptible to tum'ah. Here also, the reason that you shouldn't take it on as your arba minim would be the same thing, because just like teruma you should not make it tameh, Maaser Sheni also you should not make it tameh. So just like it will be a problem over there to make the etrog of teruma susceptible to tumah, here also will be a problem to make the etrog of Maaser Sheni susceptible to tumah, and hence that would be identical. Hare ze machshira leman da amar mipenesh mafsida hare mafsida, and what would be the same exact thing with the second opinion, who holds that etrog of teruma you can't take because you're damaging it, you're scratching it against the lulav, and hence you are making the teruma not appealing. Would be the same problem with Maaser Sheni, because just like there is a mitzvah to keep the teruma intact and nice, it will be a mitzvah to keep the Maaser Sheni intact and nice. You don't want to damage it. Fine. So therefore we understand why you should not be taking Maaser Sheni etrog as your arba minim. Now, the Mishnah also said, Ve'im natal kasher. If you did end up taking the etrog of Maaser Sheni as your arba minim, it's kasher, it's fine. Why is that? Says the Gemara, let's see, because none of the problems that we had with orla, if you took etrog of orla, but the eved even it's not good. Right. And those two reasons that we had for etrog of orla does not apply to Maaser Sheni. Let's see. The one that says the reason why orla that you're not yotze is because there's no heter achir, it's asur b'achila. Over here it's not asur b'achila, it's mine. I'm in Yerushalayim, I could eat it, no problem. It's mutar b'achila. And that would be according to everybody. You remember we had this machloket, the minor machloket, Rabbi Meir, that holds Maaser Sheni is mamon gavoa, right? So we said there are two things here. One, everybody holds that the etrog that you take for your arba minim has to be edible, has to have heter achila. If you can't eat it, if it's asur to eat it, it's considered not mine, right? I don't have dominion over it. But then there was this machloket that maybe you also need, you know that Rabbi Asi held that you also needed to have din mamon. He also has to have some monetary value. So that becomes questionable because that's only according to Rabbanan. According to Rabbi Meir, Maaser Sheni it's not your monetary value because it's Mishulchan Gavoa, it belongs to Hashem ultimately, right? So therefore, says the Gemara, if you only need heter achila, if you only need it to be edible, Maaser Sheni in Yerushalayim, when it's mine, it's edible, no problem. And that will be according to everybody, according to Rav Asi, according to Rabbanan, Rabbi Meir, Chachamim, everyone. Says the Gemara, din mamon, but according to Rav Asi, who holds that not only my etrog that I use in my arba minim has to be edible for me, but it also has to be my mamon, my money. So then, Maaser Sheni, according to Rabbi Meir, is not my money. According to Rabbi Meir, is mamon gavoa. Only according to Chachamim, is considered mine. So therefore, high money, Rabbanan. Then according to Rabbanan, the Mishnah that says that if you took Maaser Sheni etrog in your arba minim and you shook that, your yotze, that would be only Rabbanan. Because according to Rabbi Meir, if I took the etrog of my Maaser Sheni as a part of my arba minim, am I yotze? Absolutely not. Because it's not my mamon, according to Rabbi Meir, according to Rabbi Asi. So says the Gemara, next piece, alta chazazi. Do you remember we had, if the etrog on its surface has boils, has like bubbles, it looks like pimples, and that's pasul. It's ugly, it's pasul, it's not kasher. So the Mishnah said, if you have chazazit, if you have this bubbles, boils, pimples, however you call it, if the chazazit is in the majority of the surface of the etrog, it's pasul. If you have chazazit only in the minority, it's a little bit, then it's going to be kasher. So alta chazazit, now let's study these together. Alta chazazit amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said, Davar ze Rabbeinu Hagadol amaro. This I heard from our great rabbi. We mentioned that whenever Rav Chisda says that, and this is the second time we've had it, is a reference to Rav. Rav was like the chief rabbi of Bavel. That's why they didn't call him in his name. His name was Rab Abba. His nickname was Abba Arichta because he was very tall and handsome. He was one of the most handsome individuals in the generation. He was one of the healthiest individuals in the generation because he was, Rav was mishpachat biriyim. He lived a tremendously long and blessed life. But aside from that, he was a tremendous person. He was the greatest Talmid Chacham of the time, in the time of the Amoraim, the first generation of Amoraim. He was the rabbi. In Bavel, he was Rav. He was the rabbi. The chief rabbi, just as Rebbe was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, we call him Rebbe. We call him Rav. And the difference of Rav from Rebbe, we mentioned before that Rebbe, the Chachamim in Eretz Yisrael would be called Rebbe. The Chachamim in Bavel would be called Rav, right? Obviously, Rav also learned by Rebbe. You see this in many places. Actually, it's interesting, as a younger person, he also was in the Bet Midrash of Rebbe together with his uncle. Who is the illustrious uncle of Rav? None other than Rab Chia. Rab Chia was the author of Braitas, right? The author of Braitas is Rab Chia, which was a Talmid Chaver of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He was a student, but he was so high up that he was considered like a friend student, right? And there, for instance, the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Daf Gimel, has a story that Rav was asking off-topic questions in the shiur, and after the shiur, his uncle Rabbi Chia chastised him. He said, how many times do I have to tell you not to ask off-topic questions? Because it happens to be that Rabbi Yohanasi is a tremendous person, he could answer anything. But what if he was a regular person, and you ask him something that he's not prepared to answer, and then he gets confused, and it's going to be embarrassing, and so on and so forth. You should not be doing it. It's not the right conduct, right? The Gemara says also in Masechet Chulin, for instance, I believe it's in Kuf Lamed Zayin, the Gemara there says that Rabbi Yochanan, who is the author of Talmud Yerushalmi, he considered Rav as his rabbi, even though that he also learned by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. But he considered, after the passing of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, he considered Rabbi Abba, Rav, as his rabbi. He says in the Gemara over there, Itli Rav beBavel. Even though Rabbi Yochanan was very proud of being in Eretz Yisrael, he said a person only would have longevity in Eretz Yisrael, and so on and so forth. The Torah is already says that. But he said, my rabbi lives in Bavel. Who is that? Rav. Right? And he says, he said, in the Gemara there, says, when me and Rav were together in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, right? So he says, Rav sat 17 shuras in front of me. Back then, they sat people according to their status, to their knowledge. And Rabbi Yochanan says, Rav sat 7 in the first shura, in the beginning. He sat 17 rows in front of me, close to Rabbi. And when he got up to speak, to ask questions, challenge, and discuss something with Rabbi, nobody had a clue what they were talking about. There's him and him, they're shooting Mekomot on each other. Rabbi Kotler, when he was a very young rabbi from Slusk, at age 20, he was the Rosh Yeshiva of Slusk. He was a tremendous Baal Kishron. And he was obviously in the same time as the Rogichover, the mighty Gaon of Dvinsk, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, who was known as the Gaon of the generation. He was a very fast-minded individual, and he also was very sharp. So he had no patience for people who didn't really know what they're talking about. It's scary to go to him, but at the end of the day, when people went there, they wanted to go see him. So there was a fellow, you're talking about a person that knew Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi, and older Rishonim and Acharim on his fingertips by heart. Here's the one that when the fake Yerushalmi came out, there was a weird, interesting Gaon that put out Yerushalmi, because we have lost Yerushalmi on Kochim. So there's this Yerushalmi on Kochim that surfaced, that looked as legit as any other Yerushalmi, and people didn't know if this is legit. It's not legit. It just surfaced now, and he was the one that when they gave it to him overnight, he went through the whole thing. In the morning, he said, "This is not right. This is not legit. It's a forged." He said it's very well forged, but the reason that he knew that this is forged, and it took other people, a long time to figure it out. He knew it overnight because he said, "There's nothing new in this. Whoever wrote it is very good. It's a Gaon, but every single thing that's mentioned here is a codification of a Yerushalmi Kochim that one of the Rishonim or Acharonim has already mentioned. So there's nothing really new inside over here. It's changed the names a little bit and so on and so forth. But the Maseh, it can't be that you found the Yerushalmi and there's nothing new in it. So therefore, he felt it was. So that's the type of. So Rabbi Kotler went to him as a 20-year-old, and they started talking. And they were talking for 8 hours straight. 8 hours straight. So someone that was there in the room said, I was there. I had no clue a thing that they were saying. He said they started talking, and after 2 seconds, they were just shooting Mekomot on each other. I said, so what do you do with the Rashba in Chulin? So, oh, no, that's not a problem because it will run, with the Zara. And then the whole 8 hours was just, they knew what they were talking about. I had no clue what they were saying. Right? So that's kind of thing that Rabbi Yochanan, by the way, at the end of that meeting, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, Ragichov Gaon, asks Rabbi Kotler, he says, so Nu, what do you do? He says, he was afraid to say, I'm a Rosh Yeshiva in Slusk. He said, Ich bin a Baal Bat in Slusk. He says, I'm a Baal Bat, a regular working man. He says, for a Baal Bat is not bad.
Wow.
That's what he said. He was the scary person to talk to in learning. But at the end of the day, this was this was the impression that Rabbi Yochanan had of Rabbi. So when me and him were in yeshiva, he would stand up to talk and learning with Rabbi. No other person knew what they were exactly saying. So that's Rabbeinu Hagadol. So when Rabbi Chisda says Rabbeinu Hagadol, it's a reference to Rav. So says that's a long preface for a little introduction, but says the Gemara.
Well worth it.
Yeah. So says the Gemara. דבר זה רבנו הגדול אמרו המקום יחיה בעזרו, השם should help him, לא שנו אלא במקום אחד. This that we say, chazazit, that it's on the majority of the surface of etrog is pasul, is only if it's all concentrated in one place. But if you have it a little bit spotted in several different places, then it will be kasher. What says that's impossible, absolutely impossible. And Rabbah says to Rav Chisda, says that's impossible. Adarabah, on the contrary, it's worse when it's in several different places. It's a spotted thing. It looks very ugly. And at least if it's concentrated in one place, it's one place that's ugly. The rest of the etrog is nice, right? You can kind of like hold it in a way that. But if it's all over the place, menumar, it's spread throughout the etrog, then of course it's going to be a problem because it's going to become an umaru pasul. So therefore, says the Gemara, that's a misquotation of what Rabbi Chisda said in the name of Rav. You know what really was said by Rabbi Chisda in the name of Rav? Not on the reisha of this Mishnah, but on the seifa. In other words, if you have the majority of etrog full of this bumps, this bubbles, this boils, pimples, whatever you call chazazit, then regardless of how it is, few places, one place, concentrated, naga, it's pasul. But if you have this boils only a minority of the etrog, then it's a different story. Then it's kasher, right? And on that, said Rav Chisda in the name of Rav, it's only kasher if it's concentrated in one little place. But if you take those chazazit, those bumps, and you spread it, one bump here, one bump here, one bump here, then it's menumar and it's pasul. That's what he said. Not that spread is better, but the spread is worse, because now you have problems all over the etrog. So let's read it together. Ela, itmar, asefa itmar. It's said on the last part. Al miuto kasher, if you have chazazit, on the minority of the etrog is kasher. V'amar, Rav Chisda amar, Rav Chisda said this, my great Rabbi Rav said, Hashem should help him. Lo shanu, we didn't learn that the etrog is kasher if he has chazazit on its minority, ela b'makom echad. Only if it's all concentrated in one place. If it's spread throughout the etrog, that is a spotted etrog. And spotted etrog will be pasul. Amar Rava. Rava said, I will add one halacha to this. If you have any chazazit, forget about miuto. If you have any chazazit, even one, on the chotem of your etrog, it's pasul. What's chotem? Literally translated as nose, right? Which refers to the area of the upper area of the etrog from the place that it starts slanting down towards the tip, right? Why? Because when you hold that catches the eye much more. When you're holding the etrog in your hand does not cover the top. It's slanted towards your eye. That's what people see. So therefore, that is a much bigger psul of hadar when you have a chazazit, you have a bump, you have a pimple in front of your eye on the chotem. So therefore, Rava says, if you have any chazazit on the chotem of the etrog, the whole thing is pasul. Even one chazazit and you're gone. Yeah, these are things that you have to be mindful of because, again, as we're not discussing necessarily halakha l'maaseh, but these are things that happen all the time. You're having things that are considered, according to many poskim, chazazit, you have them regularly found on etrogim that are sold on stands, different, by people who may or may not know the details of the halakha. So therefore, if the seller is not an educated consumer, at least the consumer should be an educated consumer. So therefore, it's important to learn the halachot of etrog, and also to show it's a good minhag in the yeshivot that people show their etrogim that they choose to the Rav. They go to the Rav of the shul, the Rav or Shiva, and they check to make sure that what they got does not have any halachic issues. So says the Gemara. Next topic that we learned was Nitla pitmato. Remember when we said that if the tip was taken, is the top pitom was taken, then the whole thing is pasul, right? So says the Gemara, Tar Rabbi Yitzchak ben Razar, Nitla buchnato. According to Rashi, Rashi brings two different pshatim over here, and according to the first pshat that he likes, that he learned from his Rebbe, is the same thing as pitom, is just called a buchna, a different thing. But nitla pitmato or buchnato would be pasur. Now, niklaf, if the etrog was peeled, we said it's pasur, right? If you peel the etrog, it's pasur. Amar Rava said, wait a second. Hai etroga de iglid ke ahina sumka kashera. If you peel off the entire etrog, you take one of these professional peelers, and you peel a thin peel from the entire surface of the etrog, and then it turns into this thing that looks like a reddish date, kasher. You can take it for your arba minim. Says Gemara, wait a second. You're toeh b'dvar Mishnah. The Mishnah says if it's niklaf, it's pasul. If you peel it, it's even a little peeling is asur. Now you peel the whole thing and he says kasher. Well, says that's exactly the pshat. Niklaf pasul. We learned niklaf is pasul. So it says no, look, kasher, it's not a problem. Ha bekula, ha bemiksata. It's kind of like a ironic reality. Right? It's counterintuitive. The one says that's exactly why it's pasul. When you only peeled a little bit, it's like menumar. Look at Rashi. Bekula kasher bemiksata pasul, the menumarhu, because it is considered spotted. If you take a little peel off, the whole thing is nice goldish yellow, and then you have this brownish reddish part of the etrog. It looks very ugly. But if the whole thing now became, completely the same, it looks exactly the same. It looks nice. So then with that menumar, the peel is not a big deal. That's what it seems to say, right? Now, how do you reconcile the Mishnah that says even a little peeling off is a problem with this, that you peel the whole thing? Is because one of them looks very ugly, and it does not match. An unmatching spotted thing is pasul. But if the entire thing is homogeneous, it looks the same thing, then it's fine.
But it's not common practice.
It's not common practice. The question is, the Gemara, as always does, it entertains every possibility to know what exactly is the kav hadin. Where do you draw the line? Not that I'm going to do it, but if something, I want to know if the peel is a necessary part of the etrog, it's not a necessary part of the. Why is it that's pasul when I peel it off? Why? Is it because I need the peel, or is it because it looks ugly without the peel?
Whoa.
You hear what I'm saying? So that's the question of the Gemara, and the Gemara is over here seemingly says that it is a problem of menumar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihya b'dvaro.
Amen.
Now the Gemara says one more piece over here. Nistak nikav, that if your etrog got a crack in it from the top to the bottom, right, from the tippy top until the okitz, the whole thing like cracked from one side, we said this pasul. Nikav, we differentiated between a nekev, a hole that took off something of the flesh of the etrog, versus a hole that didn't touch the flesh of the etrog, didn't take anything off, it just penetrated in, right? And then we spoke on our own, which is going to be our Gemara really, that if you had a hole that didn't take anything off, but it went through and through, you passed the long, sharp and narrow needle inside the etrog from one side, took it out from the other side, even though you didn't take a thing out, still would be a nekev mefulash that's pasul, that we're going to learn in our Gemara. So says the Gemara, Tani Ula bar Chanina. Ula bar Chanina said, it has to be Chirna, I thought so. Yeah, decide. The Bach. Tani Ula bar Chanina, nekev mefulash b'mashu. If you penetrated a hole from one side to another, like in Masechet Eruvin Shabbat, maboy mefulash. If it's through and through, it's like a street that's open from both ends. Here also is a hole that went through from one side, came out from the other side, even though that you didn't take a thing from the flesh of the etrog, it was not touched. It just kind of like a small, narrow hole that was penetrated inside, still was pasul. Now, if you have a nekev that's not mefulash, it's not through and through, then keisar. Then it will be keisar. That means a small matbeh. It has to be a thickness of I don't know what would be the equivalent. Would be like a dime, like a small coin. That would be the hole that would make it pasul, right? If you have that type of hole, it's not, if it's mefulash, even if it's very tiny. If it's not mefulash, it's not through and through, then the hole that makes it pasul would be a hole that's kebe'isar. Beke'isar, it's the diameter of an isar, of a small coin. By Rava, Rava says, Nolad be'etrog. Oh, we're out of time a little bit here. Now that's going to give the preface of this, is actually very important. Rava says, if you have on etrog, this is actually very interesting to think about the hashkafic things of etrog. But Rava says, if you have in your etrog anything that will make an animal pasul, then your etrog is pasul. Now we have 18 at least simane terefa. If a cow, if you have different damages, blemishes in an animal that would render them not livable for a year, that they would die within 12 months, that is considered terefa, right? And you know, all kinds of different things. You know, if the brain is damaged, the casing of the brain, the thin layer, the protective layer of the brain, it's damaged. If the stomach is punctured, there are all kinds of different terefot. If the lungs are not healthy anymore, if the lungs have a sircha or have a hole or have melted inside, and so on, all of those we'll be discussing in reference to what and what not would be kasher and pasul in etrog, which is a fascinating talk, which will, Bezat Hashem, continue in the next year.